You felt it, the World Cup. A ball rolling toward a goal, and more than 1 billion people holding their breath in the same instant. Every 4 years, it becomes the single largest thing the human species does together. And hanging invisibly over that field is a river of money so big, it's genuinely hard to picture. One tournament, 1 month, billions of dollars, sloshing around a game invented by school children. Here's the strange part. Almost none of that money ends up where you'd guess. Not mostly with the players, not with the country that spent a fortune to host it, not even, really, with the sport itself. So follow it with me. Where does all the World Cup money actually go? The answer isn't a scandal. It's something stranger, a quiet lesson in what the modern world actually pays for. Follow the money far enough, and it stops being about football at all. And once you see it, you won't watch a match the same way again. Start with the size of the river, because the numbers barely sound real. In its most recent 4-year cycle, the one that ended with the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, football's governing body, FIFA, took in $7.5 billion, up 18% from the cycle before. And almost all of it comes from just 2 places. The biggest, by far, is television. Selling the rights to broadcast the matches brought in about $3.5 billion, nearly half of everything. The second is sponsorship, the brands whose logos ring the pitch, worth nearly $2 billion more. The rest trickles in from licensing, hospitality, and tickets, each close to $1 billion on its own. Now here's the first thing that surprises people. FIFA, the body collecting all those billions, is officially a non-profit. Legally, it isn't even a company. It's registered in Zurich as an association, the same slice of Swiss law, Article 60 of the Civil Code, that covers your local chess club or hiking group. It pays very little tax. It has no shareholders, and it sits on cash reserves of around $4 billion. A non-profit hiking club with a $4 billion war chest. So if there are no owners to pay out, where is all the money going? To answer that, you have to look at who actually pays to put the tournament on, because it isn't FIFA. Think about what a World Cup physically needs. Stadiums, airports, hotels, roads, trains. Someone has to build all of it, and that someone is almost never FIFA. It's the host country. Qatar, for 2022, spent an estimated $220 billion getting ready. By far the most expensive World Cup ever, nearly 19 times the one before it. Most of that was broad national infrastructure Qatar wanted anyway, but the stadiums alone ran somewhere between $6 and $10 billion. Built by the host, owned by the host, paid for by the host. And here's the part that should make you tilt your head. Often, those stadiums never pay for themselves. Take Brazil in 2014, about $15 billion to host. In Manaus, deep in the Amazon, it built a gleaming 42,000-seat arena for $270 million. The problem? Manaus has no major team to fill it. After the World Cup left, some matches there drew crowds of under 1,000 people in a stadium built for 42,000, while it cost roughly $250,000 a month just to keep the lights on. Economists have a name for these buildings: white elephants. The Capitol Stadium cost $900 million, 3 times its budget, and later ended up, for a while, as a parking lot for city buses. South Africa saw the same thing in 2010. At FIFA's urging, Cape Town built a 70,000-seat stadium for $600 million, and within a few years, it sat largely empty, losing as much as $10 million a year, with some locals openly asking whether it should just be torn down. The economist Andrew Zimbalist wrote a whole book on this, subtitled "The Economic Gamble Behind Hosting the Olympics and the World Cup." His blunt conclusion? For the host, it's usually a money-losing proposition. The host builds the stage. The host eats the bill. So the money clearly isn't piling up there. Keep following it. Surely then, it goes to the players. The actual stars on the field? Some of it does. FIFA handed out $440 million in prize money in 2022. The winners, Argentina, took home $42 million to split between an entire squad. That sounds enormous, but set it next to the $7.5 billion that came in, and the prize money is about $1 in every 17. Out of every dollar the World Cup brought in, all the winnings for all 32 teams added up to roughly 6 cents. FIFA also pours money back into the sport, roughly $2.8 billion over recent years, spread across all 211 of its member countries, for pitches, coaching, and youth programs. Real things in real places. So a lot of money genuinely flows outward, and yet the reserve only grows. Why does a non-profit need a $4 billion cushion at all? Officially, to keep the tournament alive even if one were ever wiped out. Either way, the pile stays. For a long time, very few people outside football asked hard questions about these flows. That changed in 2015, when U.S. prosecutors unsealed a 47-count indictment and had 7 officials arrested in a Zurich hotel, alleging more than $150 million in bribes had changed hands over 24 years, much of it tied to selling those very television and marketing rights. Set the wrongdoing aside for a second, and notice the tell. The thing worth bribing over wasn't the stadiums or the trophies, it was the rights, which points straight at the real question. Forget who spends the money. What exactly is the world paying billions of dollars to buy? Here's the answer almost no one says out loud. The World Cup's real product was never the football. It's you, or more precisely, your attention. Go back to that broadcast money, the $3.5 billion, the single biggest slice of everything. A television network in your country isn't buying a soccer game. It's buying the one thing that's become almost impossible to get in the modern world. A few billion human beings all looking at the same thing at the same moment. In a world chopped into a billion separate screens, that has become the rarest thing there is. The 2022 final reached an audience of around 1.5 billion people. Across the tournament, FIFA estimated 5 billion, well over half the planet engaged with it in some way. There is no other event on Earth that gathers attention like that. Not the Olympics, not the Super Bowl, nothing. And that's what FIFA actually owns. Not the stadiums, the host builds those. Not the players, their clubs and countries pay them. FIFA owns the rights to the single largest pool of human attention that exists, and once every 4 years, it rents that attention out to broadcasters who resell it to advertisers, who are really just buying a sliver of your evening. The host builds the stage, the players supply the drama, the fans supply the passion, and the body in the middle, which kicks no ball and lays no brick, holds the one thing all of it produces, the eyes of the world. That's where the money goes. It flows, always, toward whoever owns the attention. So when you sit down to watch, for free, you might think, you're not really the customer, you're the product. And 5 billion of you is worth, quite literally, billions. It's the same quiet bargain behind almost everything that feels free. The broadcast, the highlight clip, the endless scroll. Somebody, somewhere, is paying for your eyes. The World Cup is just the purest, largest version of it ever built. The football is the bait. The audience is the catch. It even hides in the name. The American word soccer isn't American at all. It came from Oxford students in the 1880s who shortened association football to assoc, then added a slang ending, the same way they turned rugby into rugger, a nickname for a schoolyard game. That schoolyard game is now the most watched spectacle in human history, and we have a word for the people who can't look away. Fan, short for fanatic, from the Latin fanaticus, belonging to the temple. So the next time 1 billion people hold their breath with you, remember what you're really part of. We built a new temple out of a children's game, and once every 4 years, half the world walks in and quietly pays admission with the one currency that's actually scarce now, our attention. The money was never chasing the football, it was chasing us.